Hi there and welcome back to another video. Tanya and I recently spent a couple of days on the remote island of Rapa Nui, or as it's more commonly known, Easter Island. It's a very popular tourist destination and people come from all over the world to visit this remote little place. It's owned by Chile and it can only be reached either by sea or by a 5.5-hour plane ride from Santiago, Chile. We came on a cruise ship. There are about 8,000 people on the island, and their primary source of income is tourism. And actually, it's not only their primary source of income, it's really their only source of income. And other than remittances from Easter Islanders who live abroad. Tourists come to Easter Island to see the amazing stone statues, the Moai, that are all over the island. There are over 800 of them. And there's been so much written about the history of the island, and there are so many YouTube videos covering it and how these Moai came into existence that we're not even going to attempt to cover all of that in this video. The statues are indeed huge, and the reason I think so many tourists come here is that there remains a sense of mystery as to, one, how they were made, and two, what were they for? And also, three, how did they get to where they are throughout the island? There's one theory that suggests that the Moai were either the work of extraterrestrial aliens or they were made to honor such aliens and they were moved around the island by supernatural forces. A variation of this theory is that aliens may have been marooned on the island and they planted the statues as a signal to help themselves get rescued. Somehow the extraterrestrial theory doesn't make much sense to me, and it's been pretty heavily debunked simply because space is so big and the idea of extraterrestrials coming here with that is a very remote idea. Although I am sure that there are probably some people who come to Easter Island because of that theory. As to how the statues were made, that's an easy one to explain. They were carved in volcanic quarries throughout the island, primarily at the Raruco volcano, and we can even see some of the partially finished ones there. Carving tools have been found that would have been used to sculpt the Moai. The volcanic rock is relatively soft and it would have been carved by using obsidian tools rather than metal ones. So it was certainly possible that the Rapa Nuians had the technology to carve these things. Regarding the questions of what they were for, the most popular theory is that they were built to honor deceased chiefs or ancestors, and that by carving these statues, their energy or mana could be captured and thereby guarantee the protection of the island and its people. They were erected on temple platforms or aha along the coast where they faced inland to keep watch over the local people. There is one group of Moai at Ahu Akivi that faced the ocean, but that's because the village they protected was between the Ahu and the ocean, so the Moai faced toward the village and the ocean essentially at the same time. Another group of archaeologists has theorized that the statues are where they are because they were positioned near sources of groundwater. The position of the Moai could indicate a tribe's claim to the water, as well as to honor ancestors and to protect a village. Although it seems a very complicated and difficult way to mark your water source, but it's a theory. The final question of how did these huge statues get moved to where they are throughout the island has been answered by archaeologists who have shown that by a system of using ropes and either walking the Moai, the statues back and forth in a walking movement, they could be moved. Or by using a system of both ropes and logs, the Moai could have moved from one place to the next. And there are very few trees on Easter Island now, but there is evidence that the island once was heavily forested, and so these trees could have been cut down and the logs made so that they could move the Moai on them and get them to where they were required to go. Needless to say, any of these processes took a lot of teamwork and a lot of men to do that. Now, when the islands were discovered, there weren't that many islanders on Easter Island, on Rapa Nui, and so the initial archaeologists thought, well, how could this possibly be? There just aren't enough people there to have moved all these things. But there's evidence that at some point prior to that, there were as many as 15, maybe even 20,000 people that lived on this little island. So they had enough manpower to move the statues. So what was of interest to us was not only the past of Rapa Nui, but what about the people who live on the island today? It's pretty amazing to see these 8,000 people living out here really in the middle of nowhere. The closest island to them is Pitcairn Island, which is over 1,200 miles away, and Pitcairn only has 43 people who live on it. So I mean, they don't have a lot of neighbors out there. We talked to our tour guide, Lonnie, who gave us what her take is on living there and why would people live there and do they enjoy it and how do they feel about things. What's it like to grow up on a remote island like this with 8,000 people and a 5.5-hour flight to anywhere? So Lonnie told us, okay, she grew up on the island. She has left the island a few times in her young life. She made a trip to Tahiti as a child. She visited Florida with her family. She's made trips to Mexico and Brazil. And she spent a year in New Zealand after high school. So for only being 21 years old, she's traveled a little bit. I asked her if she wants to stay on Easter Island, and she said no. She wants to attend university in New Zealand, live there, and not return until later in life. But the more we talked to her over the course of 2 days, she expressed some misgivings about leaving the island she has called home. And it's only natural. She obviously has great pride in her island's culture and history and wants to see that culture perpetuated. She told us the two major challenges of living on Rapa Nui is its limited access to health care and education. The island does have a strong tradition of natural medicine, but there's a lack of proper medical care, especially for the elderly, and Lonnie looks at the elderly, including her grandfather, as the foundation of the island's history and culture. She also feels that there are many young people on Rapa Nui who have high potential, but without access to higher education. There is no university on Rapa Nui. Their potential isn't realized, and there's little opportunity for them to realize their personal and professional growth. I think that's why she wants to go to New Zealand. Makes sense. As in any remote place like Easter Island, there is a strong sense of community and people relying on each other. One interesting aspect of life on the island is that there are lots of extended and connected families. Marriage, in the traditional sense, is not necessarily the norm, and people get together and raise children, but they break up if they find that relationship no longer meets their needs. And that's exactly what's happened in her own family. She has half siblings, and they get along fine, and I sounds like that the partners of the different couplings that create these connected families, they accept this as it's just the way things are. It's just the way of life. But she did admit that when the time comes, she wants to have a proper traditional marriage. Since Rapa Nui is a territory of Chile, I asked Lonnie if she considered herself Chilean and had a strong affinity or any kind of affinity to Chile, and she said no, not really. She has a Chilean passport, and most of the people on Rapa Nui speak Spanish, but she and all the rest of them are primarily Rapa Nuians. And that's all there is to it, and that makes sense. They rely on Chile for some of their police protection. They have a local constabulary. But she said when a new policeman or a police officer comes from Chile and tries to strictly enforce some of the laws that Chile says that they should be abiding by, it doesn't take too long before that police officer starts to adjust to the island's cultural norms and realize that Chile is really a long ways away, and so they sort of adapt to the way life really works on the island. Our 2 days on Rapa Nui and our time spent with Lonnie was a valuable glimpse into this remarkable place and its people, and we would urge you that if you decide to go to Easter Island, of course, go there to see these incredible statues that are all over the place, but try to reach a little bit deeper into the culture and any of the people that are there if you can. And if you can spend more than a few days there are people I know that will spend a week or maybe even more on the island, and there are hotels there. To get to know the people and get to understand how remarkable this place is that's just out there. And I think you'll be richly rewarded. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.